Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got Scout with me, and what we're going to dive into is risk, exercise, and then its relationship to developing diseases. Specifically, we're going to focus on Alzheimer's and dementia today. So understanding risk is going to be crucial, but because it allows us to make informed decisions to safeguard our health. Now, risk refers to the likelihood of developing a disease or a chronic condition in our lifetime. Now, we all have a chance of developing some kind of chronic condition at some point in our life. The degree of risk is going to vary depending upon the individual. So, some people might be at higher risk due to certain factors like age, genetics, or also lifestyle choices. So, those really are our buckets of things. So, like age, am I at risk depending on my genetic profile, and am I engaging in behaviors that might be detrimental to my health or behaviors that might help my health? So let's talk about risk factors. These are known as elements that increase the likelihood of developing a specific condition. For example, age is almost always a risk factor for most diseases. A 20-year-old typically has a low risk for cardiovascular disease, whereas a 75-year-old faces a higher risk. So age plays a significant role in determining risk. But here's the important part. While some risk factors are beyond our control, like age, many others can be addressed with proper support. Take physical activity, for example. This is a modifiable risk factor, meaning we can change it. Can't change age, we can change what we do for physical activity. So by increasing our exercise levels or our physical activity levels, we can significantly reduce the risk of various chronic conditions and also comorbidities. Now let's discuss the concept of effective versus optimal doses of exercise, because this is going to be important. So first we need to know, does it actually work? So effective means that an intervention works to reduce the risk of a specific condition. We can show this by, for example, comparing two groups, one group engaging in a particular activity and the other not. If the active group exhibits a significantly reduced risk, then we can say that the intervention is effective. But exercise, which is, if we said just like medicine, it does come in doses. So finding the optimal dose is where maximum risk reduction occurs. For example, every 1,000 steps might reduce the risk of developing diabetes. That's a linear relationship. So maybe, we keep reducing our risk up to a certain point. On the other hand, the risk reduction for diabetes through strength training might not be linear like that. For example, doing 1 day of strength training per week might lead to a 50% reduced risk, but there might be no difference in risk between the person that does 3 days per week and the person that does 4 days per week. So in this case, if 1, 2, and 3 led to reduced risk, but no more reduced risk after that, then the optimal dose in this case would be 3 days. There will, of course, be individual factors, so this does not mean an optimal dose. For me, it's always going to be the same as for you, and all I can really share is what research says. In the studies that I reference, I will make sure to leave the links to those studies in the notes. So now, before I go into this, again, I like to do these with different chronic conditions. I also like to host interviews with people in order to help you get more motivated and stay consistent with exercise. So if you enjoy the content here, please subscribe to this channel so that you can get alerted for when more of these videos come out. So now let's shift our focus to Alzheimer's and dementia. Dementia is a syndrome characterized by a gradual decline in cognitive functions, often accompanied by neuropsychiatric symptoms. So Alzheimer's disease is the most widespread cause of dementia. There's different types of dementia. The next most common is vascular dementia, which actually is quite interesting because from reading this, it seems like exercise is more effective at preventing vascular dementia. So age plays a crucial role in the risk of developing dementia. As age advances, the risk increases, with the likelihood roughly doubling every 5 years. So I'm going to cover just risk first, risk of getting it, and then we'll talk about exercise and how that plays a role in reducing risk. So this is going to be one study. This was from Ezra Fishman, who at the time was a PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, and he conducted a study in 2017 focusing on the relative risk of dementia. He found that at the age of 75, there were 16 new cases of dementia per 1,000 person years. I'll explain this later. At age 85, this risk increased to 37 new cases per 1,000 person years. And for ages 90 to 95, the risk ranged from 56 to 86 new cases per 1,000 person years. And so Fishman, the author, writes in reference, this is in reference to a cohort that was born in 1920, that the average 70-year-old male has a 26.9% probability of developing dementia in his remaining lifetime and will be expected to have a little bit spotty. We'll be working on improving that. He also said for an average 70-year-old female, the risk of developing dementia in her remaining life is 34.7%, and she will be expected to live 1.74 years with dementia. And he also added in a cohort that was born in 1940, the lifetime risk of dementia was slightly higher, and this was due to longer lifespan. So again, more time exposure equates to greater overall absolute risk in your lifetime. So again, this is absolute risk. So let's talk about risk reduction with modifiable behaviors. In this example, if the average 70-year-old male has a 26.9% probability of developing dementia in his remaining lifetime, this would mean that statistically, out of 100 individuals who are 70 years old, around 27 of them are expected to develop dementia at some point during the rest of their lives. Now let's consider another cohort of 70-year-old men who engage in a lot of physical activity, resulting in a 25% risk reduction in getting dementia. These are just hypotheticals. A risk reduction of 25% means that the chance of developing dementia is reduced by 1/4 of the original risk. Their new reduced risk is the population risk, which was 26.9% multiplied by 0.75 because of that 25% risk reduction, and this is about 20%. So 20% is their new absolute risk. So with a 25% risk reduction due to physical activity, the new reduced risk of the 70-year-old male cohort for developing dementia in their remaining lifetime is about 20%. In other words, if we took this cohort of 100 individuals who are getting high amounts of physical activity, about 20 of them are expected to develop dementia, which is 7 fewer than the cohort that I mentioned before that was not getting physical activity, that didn't have that added risk reduction. So these are hypotheticals. So let's get into physical activity, exercise, and then also risk. I'm going to break physical activity down into step counts, aerobic exercise, and strength training. I also discussed the outcome of these activities, which includes improved aerobic fitness, muscle strength, and muscle size. And what we're going to do is we will start out with step counts. Now, one study which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, so specifically neurology, looked at step counts and dementia risk. They observed almost 80,000 participants who were aged 40 to 79, and these people wore an accelerometer for at least 3 days, and this was able to track their step count. And what they found was that 9,826 steps per day led to a 51% risk reduction. So this was the optimal dose of stepping, while as low as 3,826 steps per day resulted in a 25% risk reduction for dementia. Now let's look at this in practical terms. The median observation duration of this study was 7 years with about, again, 80,000 participants. And this results in it's called person years. So how many person years were tracked? It was 560,000 person years. And in this time, there were 866 new dementia cases. So if we took a random sample of 1,000 participants, each year the incident rate of dementia would be 1.54 people, meaning each year we'd expect that many people to get that. Let's extrapolate that to the 7-year observation time, and we would expect 11 people out of 1,000 people to get dementia. The people who had a step count of about 10,000, that was optimal, had a 51% reduced risk. So in any given year of a sample of 1,000 people, about 7.75 of them would be expected to get dementia, or 5.25 in 7 years. So this optimal dose of steps would have saved, so that we have 5.25 people versus in the original one we had a higher number, so it was about 11 people. This optimal dose of steps would have expected to save about 6 out of every 1,000 people in 7 years from getting dementia. So that's the step count. Optimal dose seems to be around 1,000. I like this one. This is probably the most clear-cut example of an optimal dose of exercise and risk reduction, and it was in a very large sample too. So aerobic exercise has also been studied, and I think that the most useful study that I found was a 2023 study, which was published in Alzheimer's and Dementia journal. This study conducted a pooled analysis of 10 different studies all across the world, which included almost 12,000 participants. All the participants were adults that were 55 and older, and they had amongst all these studies, a median follow-up time was 5 years. So what the researchers did was they created 5 levels of duration of physical activity. Level 1 was 0 hours. Level 2 was 0.1 to 3 hours per week. Level 3 was 3.1 to 6 hours. Level 4 was 6.1 to 11 hours. And then level 5 was greater than 11 hours per week of physical activity. These researchers also looked at MET expenditure. So 1 MET is defined as 1 kcal or calorie per kilogram per hour and is roughly equivalent to the energy cost of sitting quietly. Walking was assigned a MET value of 3. I've heard MET values as high as 3.5. And jogging was assigned a MET value of 6. And so 5 levels or amounts were determined for METs. Level 1 was 0 MET hours per week, so just not engaging in any physical activity. Level 2 was 0.1 to 9 MET hours per week. Level 3 was 9.1 to 18 MET hours per week. Level 4 was 18.1 to 36 MET hours per week. And level 5 was 36 MET hours per week. So throughout the follow-up period, 800 cases of dementia were diagnosed. And the incident rate of dementia was 12.1 per 1,000 person years, meaning for every 1,000 individuals in this observed population. For each year, there was 12.1 new cases of dementia. Now, in models controlling for other risk factors like genetics, smoking, hypertension, all that stuff, even genetic risk factors, they found that the risk for duration for physical activity decreased by 18% for those who achieved 0.1 to 3 hours per week, so doing anything, and 32% for those who did 3.1 to 6 hours per week. And the risk was not reduced any further for higher amounts of physical activity. In terms of METs, there was an 8% decline in risk from the 0.1 to 9 MET hours per week, a 30% decline for 9.1 to 18 MET hours per week, and there was only a slightly greater risk reduction of 37% for those who achieved more than 36 MET hours per week. So to put this into perspective, this could be achieved with some combination of daily walking, some moderate aerobics such as cycling or jogging to achieve a MET range for that 30% risk reduction. And again, this was controlling for genetic risk predisposition and BMI, smoking, hypertension, diabetes, stroke, and depression. So all of these other things that could have contributed to dementia. So I think maybe the best way of explaining this is I'll have to read this, but it's based on a graph that the authors provided. So if we did 0 hours per week, this resulted in 207 cases of dementia. This was out of 2,039 people, which was a risk of 10.2%. And I'm just going to give you the relative risk for all of the people that are in each category. So 0 hours was 10.2%, 0.1 to 3 hours was 7.4%, 3.1 to 6 hours was 7%, 6.1 to 11 hours was 4.9% of the population developed dementia. And if it was more than 11 hours, this resulted in a 4.5% of that population ended up developing dementia during the follow-up time period. So this is just engaging in aerobic activity. The outcome of aerobic activity is usually better cardiorespiratory fitness. This is sometimes measured as VO2 max. So VO2 max refers to how much oxygen your body can absorb and use during exercise. It measures your aerobic fitness levels. It's calculated by multiplying a MET, or like I said, the metabolic equivalent value, on an aerobic test by 3.5. So in this study, researchers from the VA Medical Center examined, it was almost 650,000 veterans with an average age of 60.5 who had undergone an exercise treadmill test. They then stratified the participants based on cardiovascular fitness levels, based on age and sex-specific peak METs achieved. And the categories that they came up with were least fit, low fit, moderate fit, fit, and then high fit. And this just referred to how many METs they were able to expend when they were doing a treadmill test. Again, it's just a reflection of what their VO2 max was. Now, overall, there were a little bit more than 44,000 cases of Alzheimer's and dementia diagnosed during this 20-year follow-up period. And what they do is they compare the least fit. They can compare least fit to low fit, least fit to moderate fit, least fit to fit, and least fit to high fit. So participants in the least fit to the high fit categories had incidence rates of, it was 9.5, 8.5, 7.4, 7.2, and 6.4 cases per 1,000 person year. So compared to the least fit, those in all the other categories had a risk reduction of 13% for low fit, 20% for moderate fit, 26% for fit, and 33% reduced risk for the most fit, aerobically fit individuals. So this seems to kind of have a bit of a linear relationship. So the more aerobically fit you are, the lower risk that you have for developing dementia. Now let's move on to strength training. Now, while the health benefits of strength training have been well established, to the best of my knowledge, there's really not a lot of research examining the dose-response relationships with dementia risk, meaning we don't know how much is necessary to have an effect. A proxy for this can be cognition, which includes memory, attention, and executive functioning, which refers to the higher order cognitive processes that enable us to plan, organize, initiate, and then also self-regulate behavior. So a 2022 meta-analysis evaluated the effects of strength training on cognition. In this review, the majority of participants had an average age of 50 or older. Some studies examined cognitively impaired individuals in this case. So the duration in weeks varied across studies ranging from 4 to 96 weeks. And on average, participants did strength training 2 times per week. And what they found was overall that resistance training had positive effects on cognition and executive functioning, but it did not have a positive effect on memory, which is something that we see pretty consistently. So this is just doing strength training. We see there's positive effects on cognition, executive functioning, but not necessarily memory. We'll move on to muscular strength, which is one outcome of doing strength training. This is actually probably the best study looking at dose response relationships and dementia risk. So in one study, researchers analyzed the information from the UK Biobank, which is a significant collection of data from middle-aged and older men and women who did not have dementia at the start of the study. They aimed to investigate the connections between hand grip strength in the occurrence of dementia, as well as its links to brain imaging results and cognitive abilities. The sample included a little bit more than 190,000 adults with an average age of 56.5, and they found that for men, the risk of developing all-cause dementia was elevated by 16% for every 5 kilogram decrease in hand grip strength. In women, every 5 kilogram decrease in hand grip strength was associated with a 14% increased risk of all-cause dementia. And interestingly, like I actually said in the beginning of this video, this is more pronounced in vascular dementia. So if you're weaker, you're more at risk for dementia. The last thing that we'll cover is muscle size. So researchers out of McGill University in Canada examined the association between low appendicular lean soft tissue mass, which is just the muscle in our limbs, and a 3-year decline in 3 cognitive domains. Again, this was similar to that first study I was talking about. Included memory, executive functioning, and psychomotor speed. And this was in a little bit more than 8,000 older adults. So body composition was measured using a DEXA. So appendicular lean mass was computed as the sum of the upper and lower limbs lean mass, and they created an appendicular lean mass index, which was calculated by dividing that lean mass by their height squared. And their analysis, which is good, also controlled for grip strength and physical activity participation as well. So the average age of the participant was just under 73 years at baseline. These people were then followed for 3 years, and the researchers found that older adults living with low muscle mass experienced greater cognitive decline. This was more specifically in terms of executive functioning over 3 years compared to those that did not have low mass. So low muscle mass, which was in a little bit more than 1,600 of those participants, was equated as 7.3 kilograms per meter squared in height for men, and that number was 5.42 kilograms for women. And again, just like how strength training participation was not associated with memory, muscle mass was not associated with memory either. So to wrap this up, we seem to know more about aerobics and step counts than strength training. or muscle strength and muscle size. In terms of step counts, getting 10,000 steps seems to be optimal. For aerobics, which could include planned walks, I would encourage you to try to get at least 3.126 hours per week. For strength training, all that we can really say is that avoiding low strength and low muscle mass seems to be more important, but we need more evidence. I would also add that that for dementia, age is a large risk factor. So if you're a younger person, risk is going to be very low. But the risk increases as you age, so building up habits now can help in the future. And so that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this content, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more science-based insights on health and well-being. As always, stay curious and keep exploring the world of health and exercise. And until next time, take care, and I will see you soon.